Earlier in the week, Nigeria's National Statistical Office released the inflation report for August 2025. Part of the report showed a month-on-month food inflation rate of 1.65%, while the annual inflation rate eased to 20.12%. Tonight, Babajide Ogusanwo, who is the founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's chief data analyst, is right here to share more facts and vital insight about Nigeria's inflation trends and its potential impact on the next policy decision of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Babajide, great to have you again on the news at 10.
Good evening, Ayatunde.
So, the latest inflation report from the National Bureau of Statistics shows that inflation is indeed coming down. Are there other perspectives, to this report?
It depends on how we really want to look at it. There's been a lot of confusion about these numbers, but I'll try and explain it a bit. If inflation were a car moving at 100 kilometers per hour, what the NBS is really saying is this car is now moving at 70 kilometers per hour. So, in other words, the car is still moving forward, but it's not moving as fast as it was moving. So, the position we are today is we are in a position of disinflation, not deflation. Now, disinflation is that prices are still rising. However, the speed at which they are rising has significantly come down. So that is what the report states, is that what we're having right now is disinflation, not deflation. Deflation is prices are reversing and prices are coming down. So again, to be clear, prices are still rising, but the speed at which they are rising is calming down. And that is the good news. Let's take a look at exactly where we're coming from, even as far back as at August 2020, because it will allow us to really understand what I'm talking about, disinflation. August 2020, the inflation rate was 13%. 2021, it was even higher, 17%. As at August last year, the official annual inflation rate was 32%. Now, the good news is, if you look at that trend from August 2020, you can see it has kept rising, 13%, 17%, 21%, 26%, 32%. Now, for the first time in 5 years, inflation, yes, is still rising. However, it is now at the rate of 20%. That is the good news. Prices in Nigeria are rising, but the speed at which they are going up is reducing. Not that prices are falling. So overall, good news, and kudos to the monetary policy and the fiscal policy programs of the government. Good news. But Ayatunde, here is the bad news. Even though we've looked at inflation at 20%, yes, as a nation, we keep benchmarking ourselves with the sort of countries that Nigerians travel to and want to live in, the United Kingdom, the United States, France. So the question is, when last was the inflation rate in France and the United Kingdom 20%? The evidence we have shows 1975. That is half a century ago. So these nations have lived for more than 5 decades without witnessing inflation of 20%, which we are celebrating today. The United States, never in their old or modern history has inflation hit 20%, not even during their recessional period or during the World War period. So we need to clearly look at it, especially when you talk about perspective that yes, there's a lot of good news looking at where we're coming from in the last half a decade, but looking at the sort of nations that we want to be like, it is really not so good news.
So, Babajide, what is the true cost of living, in the country as we speak right now? I mean, how much do you need to live, and eat decently?
I probably should ask you that question.
No, but I'm asking you.
But looking at the facts from the National Bureau of Statistics, the goalpost keeps changing. The cost of living and trying to live decently in Nigeria last week is different from this week. It's likely going to be different from next week. It depends on which regions you are speaking to. However, we have some information again officially looking at and trying to aggregate some of this data. And if you take a look at, for instance, one key component which you've talked about, food inflation, the cost of living, the cost of feeding. If we take a look at that data as well, it allows you also to understand that families are feeling the pinch differently across the different regions. If you ask families living in South region, based on the data we have, they will tell you that annual food inflation is 24%. If you ask families living in the Northeast, annual food inflation is 15%. So overall, the evidence we have today shows that food inflation is significantly higher across southern Nigeria than it is in northern Nigeria. And one reason why this is happening, Ayotunde, is that 6-letter word, profits. From the farmers to the wholesalers to the retailers, the trend in behaviors we've seen is that everybody wants to maximize profit. And so the thirst for profit is really also driving the sort of numbers and the cost of food in Nigeria.
So as we round off, Babajide, I mean, the MPC, that's the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank, will be meeting tomorrow. That's from tomorrow, that is. So what sort of decisions are we expecting to see?
Tough decisions, and that's because the evidence shows that prior to now, what we've seen, and if we study the policy rates in Nigeria, what we have seen a trend is the inflation rate is usually higher than the monetary policy rate. Now, for the first time in a long while, we're in a position where the monetary policy rate is higher than the inflation rate. To be able to understand this better, let's take a look at the chart of the week, because it allows us to visualize and to be able to explain the tough decisions ahead of the Monetary Policy Committee this week. Now, the point is, let's take a look at where we were half a decade ago, September 2020. We see that position where inflation rate 14%, monetary policy rate 11.5%. So the point is, if you follow that chart all the way to September 2024, inflation rate has always been higher than the monetary policy rate. Look at last year, September 2024, inflation rate was 33%. This time last year, the monetary policy rate was below that, 27.25%. Now we're in a different position. Inflation rate is now 19-20%. Monetary policy rate is now higher, 27.5%. So the question is, what sort of country does the Central Bank of Nigeria want to have? Are we looking at a country where we want the inflation rate to be higher than the monetary policy rate? Or does the central bank governor want the monetary policy rate to be higher than the inflation rate? Whatever he does, both strategies have significant advantages and disadvantages. And I know I'm in a disadvantage of time now, Ayotunde, right?
Definitely, we are in a disadvantage of time. But of course, we'll keep our fingers crossed and see what they come up with. That's the MPC tomorrow of the central bank. But, well, better days, hopefully.
Yeah, brighter days, there's really hope, but we've seen it all. Whatever decision, a lot of work needs to be done, and there has to be clarity on exactly what the purpose of the CBN is, and does that purpose match what the president wants to achieve? But more importantly, the most important purpose is the purpose of the lives of the common man, of every Nigerian. And we'll leave it at that. Babajide Ogunsanwo, thank you for your thoughts on the news at 10. Pleasure is all mine. We'll do this next week, Ayotunde.